Most people trying to lower cortisol are accidentally making it worse. Not because they're lazy, because nobody gave them the complete picture. Every hack, every mechanism, every protocol. Let's fix that. There are two ways to attack cortisol: physical interventions, things you do with your body, and behavioral interventions, things you change about your environment and habits. Both matter. Skip one category and the other loses half its effect. Let's get into the physical ones. Cold exposure, the uncomfortable one. Cold is one of the fastest acting cortisol regulators available without a prescription. When your body hits cold water, it triggers a controlled stress response, a sharp spike in norepinephrine followed by a rapid cortisol drop as your nervous system recalibrates. The spike is short, the drop lasts hours. When cortisol stays chronically elevated, your nervous system never gets that recalibration signal. That's why people with chronically high cortisol often feel permanently wired, but never recovered. Nervleys take 2 to 3 minutes in water between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 times per week. Morning timing matters more, on that shortly. Zone 2 cardio, the most skipped one. Not all exercise lowers cortisol. High-intensity training actually spikes it, which is useful acutely, but damaging chronically if your baseline is already high. Zone 2 is the sweet spot. It's the intensity where you can hold a conversation, but just barely. At this intensity, your body releases BDNF, improves mitochondrial efficiency, and actively downregulates the HPA axis, the system that controls cortisol output. When you skip zone 2 and only train at high intensity, your HPA axis stays in a constant state of activation. That's why hard training without easy training often makes stress worse, not better. Nervleys take 20 to 30 minutes, 3 times per week. Heart rate between 60 and 70% of your maximum. Physiological sigh. 60 seconds, that's all. A physiological sigh is a double inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. The double inhale fully inflates the lungs and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's off switch for the stress response. When cortisol spikes acutely, before a meeting, after bad news, in traffic, your sympathetic nervous system takes over and cortisol floods your blood. The physiological sigh manually overrides that system in real time. When cortisol spikes and you have no intervention, the spike compounds. One spike leads to another. Nervleys take 2 to 3 repetitions, usable anywhere, anytime. No equipment, no cost. The next one is something almost everyone does, but the timing most people use is actively spiking their cortisol without knowing it. Morning sunlight, the most misunderstood one. Cortisol follows a 24-hour rhythm called the cortisol awakening response. In a healthy pattern, cortisol peaks sharply within 30 to 45 minutes of waking, giving you energy and focus, then gradually declines through the day, hitting its lowest point at night so you can sleep. Morning sunlight is what sets that rhythm. It enters through your eyes, hits the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain, and locks the cortisol clock to the actual time of day. When you wake up and immediately go into artificial light, phone, indoor lighting, no sunlight, your cortisol clock gets no signal. The rhythm drifts. Cortisol stays elevated into the evening when it should be dropping. That's why people who skip morning sunlight often feel tired in the morning and wired at night. Nervleys take 10 minutes of direct outdoor light within 30 minutes of waking. No sunglasses. Overcast days still work. Magnesium glycinate. The underdog. Magnesium is the most direct nutritional regulator of your HPA axis. It acts as a natural brake on cortisol production, binding to NMDA receptors in the brain and reducing the excitatory signals that keep the stress response active. Studies consistently show have exaggerated cortisol responses to stress The same stressor produces a much larger cortisol spike in someone low on magnesium than someone sufficient. And most people are low. Soil depletion means even a clean diet often doesn't cover the requirement. When magnesium drops, your cortisol brake weakens and stress hits harder every time. Nervly's take 300 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate specifically, not oxide, not citrate, taken 30 minutes before bed. Glycinate form crosses the blood-brain barrier most effectively. Now, the behavior ones. These don't feel like hacks, but the research behind them is harder than anything in the physical category. Sleep timing, the helper, not just sleep duration, timing. Cortisol and sleep run on the same 24-hour clock. Different bedtimes, different wake times on weekends, the cortisol rhythm loses its anchor. It no longer knows when to peak and when to drop. What happens when cortisol rhythm loses its anchor is called social jet lag. Your biology is running on a different time zone than your schedule. Cortisol stays elevated when it should be dropping and drops when it should be rising. The result is poor sleep quality, morning fatigue, and elevated baseline cortisol throughout the day, even if total sleep hours look fine on paper. Nervly's take, same wake time every day, including weekends. This single variable has more impact on cortisol rhythm than any supplement on this list. Eating window, the simplest one. When did you last give your body a real break from food? Your body needs a recovery window every single day. Not occasionally, every day. And most people never give it one. Cortisol and insulin are directly linked. Every time you eat, insulin rises. When insulin is chronically elevated from eating across a 16 to 18-hour window, your body never fully enters recovery mode. Cortisol stays mildly elevated to manage blood sugar between constant meals. Compressing your eating into an 8 to 10-hour window gives your cortisol and insulin system that daily reset. When your eating window is too wide, your cortisol never gets that undisturbed rhythm it needs. That's why late night eating specifically, which pushes cortisol up when it should be at its lowest, is linked to poor sleep and higher morning cortisol the next day. Nervly's take, eat within an 8 to 10-hour window. Last meal at least 2 to 3 hours before bed. Ashwagandha. Half the people who try it swear by it. The other half say it did nothing. The difference is almost always one mistake. Ashwagandha is an adaptogen, a compound that regulates your stress response system rather than simply blocking or boosting it. Its active compounds, called vithanolides, bind to cortisol receptors and modulate the HPA axis response, reducing both the peak and the duration of cortisol spikes under stress. The most studied extract is KSM66, a root-only extract with the highest concentration of vithanolides in clinical research. Wrong extract means inconsistent vithanolide content. Wrong expectation means waiting for an immediate feeling that never comes. Ashwagandha doesn't work that way. It lowers baseline cortisol over weeks, showing up as better sleep, lower resting heart rate, and improved HRV. Nervly's take, 300 to 600 milligrams of KSM66 extract daily, taken with food. Effects measurable within 4 to 8 weeks. Cycle of 1 week off, 1 week on. Caffeine timing. You're timing it wrong. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine, the molecule that builds up while you're awake and makes you tired. But caffeine also triggers a cortisol spike. Your body already produces its highest natural cortisol between 6 and 9 a.m. as part of the cortisol awakening response. Drinking coffee during this window stacks a caffeine-driven cortisol spike on top of your natural peak. The result is a sharper spike followed by a harder crash, and over time, cortisol dysregulation from the daily double spike. When you delay caffeine until after your natural cortisol peak has dropped, typically 90 to 120 minutes after waking, you get the full alertness effect without fighting your own biology. Nervely's take: delay your first coffee until 90 to 120 minutes after waking. This single timing shift reduces afternoon energy crashes and improves sleep onset at night for most people within 1 week. If you only start with one, fix your caffeine timing. It costs nothing, takes no extra time, and you'll feel the difference within days. Everything else builds on top of it. 9 hacks. Every mechanism, every cause, every fix, nothing skipped. Most people will never know half of this. Now you do. Subscribe for more science explained simply.